I am a fan of immersive sims. I don't think I talk about it as often as I should, to be honest, but as a game designer, I really love the idea of player autonomy and giving the necessary elements to enable said autonomy, whether it be for puzzle solutions, combat, exploration, so on and so forth. Some of my favorite games in the genre are the Dishonored and the Hitman games, and more recently Deathloop. I also have to be honest and come forth that I'm yet to play the classics, like System Shock, Thief, Deus Ex, and the recent Prey from Arcane, as I've only started to get into the genre when Dishonored 2 came out in 2017, and it felt like discovering lightning in a bottle at the time. I say all of this because I've currently been obsessed with the newest Legend of Zelda game that came out last month. Subsequently, Zelda also happens to be another franchise I've never played until I got my Switch and a copy of Breath of the Wild in 2019. At first, I was enjoying the game, but I didn't have enough time to sink my teeth into it because of uni, and this was around the time when the pandemic hit and everyone was on lockdown. The cycle of waking up, online classes, dinner, and going back to bed was really getting to me until I decided to, in the quieter moments of online classes, play a few sessions of Breath of the Wild, and let me tell you that from there onwards, that game and Animal Crossing, I can't ignore it, single-handedly carried my lockdown experience. Getting to explore Hyrule and its many secrets, experimenting with a very interactive world, and getting to grips with just how everything works made me invest a total of 145 hours into this experience I couldn't get enough of. Fast forward to 2023 and we're currently experiencing Tears of the Kingdom, the sequel long in development that I honestly didn't have much expectation, other than to still focus on the open-ended approach to player agency with the game design they hunkered down with. I'm currently 115 hours into the game, I've already beaten it and I'm still working my way through completing all the shrines, and from the very start there was a lingering thought that I couldn't shake off, that being the possibility of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom being an immersive sim. Before you type anything, hear me out for a sec. Although Breath of the Wild adopted this design philosophy of open-endedness when it comes to player agency, labeling it an immersive sim never felt warranted because even with the depth it had, it never 100% allowed you to progress through sheer curiosity when it came to puzzles, for example, or when you mix combat and exploration, and it's really hard to fit the term anywhere with only some exceptions like the consistent rules with both the physics and world interactions. Tears of the Kingdom, however, is a different story. The new game mechanics such as Ultra Hand and Fuse that allow you to attach elements together, and Ascend, which allows Link to traverse ceilings, may be simple, but in the wider context of this game world, they are so significant that it begs the question, is Tears of the Kingdom really an immersive sim? My response? Kinda. You see, a part of me acknowledges that the game contains and shares many elements within the ImSim genre spectrum, but at the same time it lacks some of those tenets that really define the genre, like world acknowledgement of your actions and the like. I really couldn't figure out how to flesh out this idea until I saw a tweet from Dinga Bakaba, a game director from Arcade Lyon, who I also happen to deeply admire by the way, that finally hit the nail on the perfect definition of this idea. Adventure sim, like, think about it. Tears of the Kingdom borrows many elements, but it shouldn't be labeled as an ImSim because it lacks many other important ones, so the idea of labeling this concoction of ideas as an adventure sim makes perfect sense, and I really want to dissect this idea, and to get started, we really need to establish a firm grasp of what immersive sims truly are at their core, or at least what I feel truly defines an immersive sim. Important note, in the middle of writing this script, Dinga made an excellent thread on Twitter last month that is just about the content of this video. Great minds think alike situation? Well, I don't think so. So what I will do with this situation is use some of his points to corroborate some of the material I have already written to further strengthen this examination, so I hope you'll enjoy this nonetheless. Categorically, immersive sims are known for placing emphasis on player agency as a core design pillar. They embrace open-ended solutions to very binary objectives, and usually contain enough game systems to take into account the impact the player may have on the sandbox the designers have prepared. Unbeknown to many, there are unwritten rules that each ImSim usually follows to fulfill that fantasy, and while I don't think many of them should be mandatory, like first-person perspective and stealth being a must for example, I personally believe in 3 rules that should be respected when tackling these types of projects. First and most obvious, a single problem should allow for multiple solutions to be conducted to overcome it. Imagine you're trapped in a facility and you need to leave the place. The level design and game systems should allow you to explore multiple routes to leave the place. For example, if you want to leave through the front door, you may be given the option to kick down the door, open it with a key, or possibly burn the hinges with a blowtorch or something as out of box as that. Or, if you explore enough, you can leave through a sewer system that happens to be magically connected to the basement, or climb enough that you'll find a skylight window to climb out of. It may sound overwhelming, the breadth of options, but that's the fantasy appeal of presenting the players a breadth of options so they can figure out a solution. Second of all, the world needs to react to the changes you cause around it. This one may not seem as obvious at first glance, but when you think about it, part of the immersive aspect also means NPCs and other game systems should have a realistic reaction to what you do. For example, set a box of wood on fire and it burns, or shoot the lamps to make the current room dimmer, making a person nearby question what happens to the lights. Or if someone in the background complains about a problem and you use that opportunity to your advantage. The Splinter Cell series, for example, has a ton of complex systems that complement each other into allowing you to mix and match various strategies that get you through your main goal. Third and finally, the most important of all, there needs to be coherency and consistency in the rules established in the game design. Stuff that you could pull off in the early hours should also be possible to pull off in the mid, final, or any time you're in the game world. As this genre is usually hands-off when it comes to guiding players and offering solutions, it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to sacrifice agency for visual spectacle that only offers wows in the initial playthrough but becomes more tedious in subsequent playthroughs. But it's not just that. Level design, game systems, and many other elements should mostly, and big emphasis on mostly and not 100% as to still allow some creative scenarios, respect the rules so it never breaks immersion. Some of you may not agree with me on this, but personally, these rules represent the core of what an immersive sim should strive to accomplish. So when you think about all of this, isn't it curious that Tears of the Kingdom happens to partake in some of these design philosophies? Well, I think the answer is a bit more complex than that. During Breath of the Wild's GDC talk on how they reimagined the game in the context of the first Zelda game on the NES, technical director Takuhiro Dota underlined the two main important systems at the core of the Breath of the Wild's game design: the physics engine and the chemistry engine. The physics are pretty self-explanatory, as just as any other game, they power the reactions of your interactions with the environment, such as ragdoll, gravity, so on and so forth. The chemistry engine, on the other hand, powers the reaction of chemical elements and how they interact with each other, like setting burnable objects on fire, melting an ice with fire, your metal weapons attracting electricity during thunderstorms. It's another layer of possible interactions that enhances the time you spend exploring Hyrule. And to accommodate such new changes, most of the mission design has taken an open-ended approach, never restricting you of how to approach certain scenarios, and letting you explore multiple ways to tackle a problem with the save systems at your disposal. It was this that made me love Breath of the Wild from the get-go, and the experience from start to finish never lost the fun of coming up with the most crooked and dumb ways to achieve something. And it wasn't just me who felt this, as since launch, people have been coming up with so many ingenious solutions, no matter how complex or simple, that I feel as though Nintendo really took that enthusiasm to heart and decided to double down on player agency for the sequel. Tears of the Kingdom, as a sequel, relies on the material already established from the previous game, including both engines that sparked the creativity of many as time went on. This is a good thing, as you can not only reuse assets that are already optimized for usage in game, but it also shortens development time and allows for most of the attention to go into the content itself. And instead of repeating the past, the double down I mentioned brought a set of new gameplay mechanics that elevate the game to a level where it feels as though Breath of the Wild, a game that is highly regarded as one of the greatest games of the last decade, was only a tech demo, which is a hard feat to pull off, and said mechanics were the catalyst that sparked the discussion we're currently having. These mechanics are Ultra Hand, Fuse, Ascend, and Recall. While similar to some, they all replace the tools given to you in Breath of the Wild on the Purapad, and in doing so, these new mechanics feel like iterations of what came before and innovative in how much of an impact they have on the overall game design. For example, the magnet in the first game is now replaced by Ultra Hand, which allows you to move most objects in the world that are not metal, with the added virtue of attaching it to any other object, opening another layer of interactivity. Another example is Stasis now being replaced by Recall, where instead of having to smack an object stuck in time to travel a certain distance should you choose so, you can rewind the trajectory of any object, which introduces another layer of an unlimited potential, like making elevators or returning objects thrown at you. It really is genius. As the name says, Fuse allows you to fuse other objects to your swords, shields, and arrows, and while its impact may not be as broad as Ultra Hand and Recall, it functions as a complementary ability that's there to aid the rest of the abilities in a varied number of ways. Ascend as an ability though doesn't have that much of an impact in terms of depth the others bring, but it's still useful when you need to get out of a cave, get to a high position, or simply skip big chunks of levels designed to be taken in a particular way the level designers prepared, like I did in the Fire Temple. So, with all of this laid out, on paper Tears of the Kingdom does fall into the spectrum of what immersive sim game design strives for, as in open-ended design, heightened player agency, and multiple solutions to a binary problem. What makes this game an outlier is that it's set in an open world setting, where most other sims are set in very complex design sandboxes which tend to be smaller. And the reason is, when you have a much smaller area to design over, as a developer you have a high degree of control in how you want to conduct the player experience, be it object placement, NPC pathing, systemic interactions, and many other variables at play. In an open world, it's much different, especially in the case of Zelda, where devs don't have much control on how under or overly designed an area may be it in the open wilderness or the shrines, and most of the systemic interactions come from the engines that enable that interactivity. Second of all, if you notice, most NPCs don't acknowledge Link's powers when you aid them, as in general, they'll reply it something along the lines of, "Oh, I didn't know how you did it, but thank you so much." On some occasions, the dialogue gets really clever to hide the fact that they didn't just see Link manipulate the position of an object. Even with other abilities like Ascend, and I don't really know whether this is a gameplay specific quirk or the simple fact that time just happens to stop when Link uses it, you'll sometimes startle NPCs as if you just teleported out of nowhere. If you look back at the rules of Sims we discussed, we touched upon NPCs acknowledging your actions, whether small or big, as it further plays into the immersive fantasy. I've actually been bouncing around this point back and forth for quite some time, because even if they don't acknowledge the process, they still recognize the result, and at this point I'm just sharing it to hear your thoughts on this. So, circling back, while we don't have a definitive answer, we can acknowledge that Tears of the Kingdom somewhat sits in that sim spectrum, while never fully committing into the genre pillars. So would it be fair to place it among the Deus Exes and Dishonored's? Well, no. Like I mentioned earlier, someone much smarter than me already did a really extensive thread on this conversation we're having right now, Mr. Dinga Bakaba, who suggested that instead of dismissing Totka's really impressive suite of tools and interactions, we should label it as an adventure sim, which is a smart label when you think about it. If we're to envision a future where adventure sim becomes a subgenre of sims, then I think the perfect definition would be games set in an open world setting where most of your time there is spent not just on adventuring, but the game mechanics allow you to have an impact on the world the same way you'd have in an immersive sim, but the complexity varies due to the sheer scale it may employ. Not just that, but also in the words of Dinga, having such a label also puts forth the adventure aspect as a centerpiece more than immersion, because sims by their nature rely on the player's intuition and agency to allow them to make their own action instead of the opposite, where action-adventure games often contain curated moments that center action and oftentimes strip you of some agency for framing's sake. If we're to look at the broader spectrum of games that fit into this description, it is somewhat hard to pinpoint games that could fit within it. The games that come to mind when I think of advanced sims is Far Cry 2, because the game's leniency on diegetic elements like physically pulling out a map or your weapons jamming mid-firing does push it into that camp. Watch Dogs Legion is another good example where Not only is the game set in a pretty big open world game, but the themes and mechanics being very centered around hacking allows the presence of very systems driven mechanics that push it into that camp I was referring to. Another game that would neatly fit this is the first Crysis game, because while not an open world and occasionally linear, you are placed into big sandboxes that give you a high degree of freedom similar to a Far Cry game, where you can go guns blazing or stealth. Not just that, but you also have the nanotech suit, which adds a layer of opportunities to be executed. Cyberpunk 2077 is also another game that I really believe borders into adventure sim more heavily than being an RPG, but I'm saving that for another video where I want to go more in depth about that particular aspect. There are also some games that I haven't played yet, but watching them online and reading some of the discussions does give the feeling that they could fit into the adventure sim moniker, like Metro Exodus, the Stalker games, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, Fallout New Vegas, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Divinity Original Sin 2, and many other titles I may not know about. In the face of it all, Tears of the Kingdom in general is a very well constructed video game, and as a sequel, it significantly improves on some of the aspects Breath of the Wild was lacking, like the story being more involved not just in the main quests but the side content as well. Many of your interactions with the NPCs feel more meaningful, or the aforementioned new mechanics that deepen the existing complexity present in the previous games, to the new content in an already existing map that still makes it feel fresh, like the Sky Isles or the Depths. For 6 years in development, they really went above and beyond to over-deliver a quality product, and I couldn't be more happy for them for executing on their vision. And as it stands with the whole adventure sim discussion, I'm really interested to hear what is your opinion, whether you're a hardcore or a casual fan of immersive sims or games that prioritize player agency, or just in general. Do you agree with some of the points? Do you not? And what do you think about all of this? I'm really interested in seeing the comments and further discussing more with you all. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, share it with your friends and activate the bell so you can get notification of my latest video, and thank you for watching.